Good evening, my friends, and thanks for joining me on this crisp winter night. I'm currently walking through my local park with my dog Lucy, and I felt inspired to bring along my GoPro and make a little video. Usually I don't share these because I end up either losing interest in what I'm talking about or just goes in kind of the junk pile like everything else. But nonetheless, over the years, one of the passions that I've had, and the most consistent thing that I've had a passion for, is making YouTube videos for some reason. And I've questioned myself, but I continue to do it. And I feel like maybe it's a release, my journal, a way to expose myself to other people and get feedback and meet people, whatever it might be. All that aside, I consider it to be a passion to talk about things. I have a very strong interest to share ideas. And I say that because the interesting fractal story of that, the inner story of the YouTube story, is what the passions that I've had inside of the time that I've been doing YouTube. When I first started, I was in my very earliest videos talking about prepping. I was very into prepping and getting ready for any type of a potential disaster or chaos that might ensue. And, I still feel that way. If you can get Band-Aids and some rubbing alcohol now, why not be smart and get it, right? Well, all that aside, it was probably because I'd been fed so much conspiracy crap over the years, listening to, not even Alex Jones, it was before his time, like William Cooper, Bill Cooper, various other government conspiracies that I'd heard about. And I believed, and still believe, that in my lifetime, something big's going to go down to where people might have to fend for themselves for a while. And that could even be a natural disaster, an earthquake here in Portland, whatever it might be. But all that aside, that's where a lot of my energy went, is just kind of maybe hoping for a disaster for many years. And I realized psychologically why. Because when we don't feel like our lives are that great, when we don't feel like we have a real future, we feel like we could do something better if there was a disaster. So for example, I might have this illusion that, I could, lead some tribe or lead a group of people to freedom. Some kind of fantasy from a zombie movie? I don't know. But I never thought about that consciously, just more like, I felt if the shit hit the fan and I was left behind, I could rebuild with who's left, right? Let's say a majority of people died. This is very morbid, but I always thought, at least I could rebuild and we could, start over fresh, do things right, farm and go back to nature, right? This kind of illusion, especially when you're younger. But part of me still feels that way and feels that it is possible, if something big were to happen, that we could actually pull it off and improve the planet and improve ourselves. And but also, I don't want a bunch of people to die, right? So there we are. It's kind of a catch. With that said, I guess I'm getting a little off track, because that passion, and the point of this is passions, that passion kind of waned. My interest in that type of knowledge got into a passion for esoteric knowledge. And that esoteric knowledge led me down many, many paths of trying to understand, everything from Freemasonry to Rosicrucianism to ancient Egyptians, and how all these things tie together to the modern day, and, the Knights of the Templar, and all the information that's been carried down through bloodlines, and just really looking at how deep everything runs. And then sometime later, shows like Ancient Aliens came out, and it just threw a whole crimp in the whole thing, because I was fascinated with aliens for a while too. And then I started seeing that shit. I'm like, well, wait a minute, is this true? You know, it was easy to fall for in the beginning, because you're like, well, I didn't know this. But you know, anyhow, we find in the long run that often the shit that we hear isn't true, and a lot of the conspiracies we hear aren't true, and a lot of it is just to sell books, and nowadays it's just to sell clicks. But it's always been that way, you know. Even in the 80s and 90s, it was just to sell books, to convince you that aliens are going to invade, or the government's going to do this. But all that aside, a lot of these things turned out to be true. Things like MK Ultra, which people were still denying back when I first learned about it. Now it's just well known. Oh yeah, the government did experiments on thousands of American people without their consent. Okay, well, let's move on to the next thing, right? So, after the conspiracy lost its spice, the conspiracy realm, this is when I got into kind of spirituality, and I got, if you will, and then I started moving, and this was probably around, I don't know, 2013, 14. Just kind of this, I'd always, you know, been into meditation and Eastern mysticism. I just didn't know as much as I wanted to, so I started to do more research. I never came to the ultimate conclusion that I wanted to be anything, whether it's a Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, or whatnot. During these times, you know, 2014, 15 maybe, I was arguing consistently with especially two specific Christians who were subscribers on my channel, and there was kind of a circle of people back then. You could do video responses. It was what they called the good old days of YouTube, which really was a thing, you know, R.I.P. good YouTube. But it was about, you know, these, you know, interactions and responses, which you find that the people can be extremely rude, condescending, and very judgmental to somebody who doesn't think the way they think. Now, this is just so common on today's internet because we are so used to it, we take it for granted. But back in the day, when people were confronted, it was much easier to get into stupid, petty debates, and I fell for it too. And I think everybody who has a YouTube channel or has started a YouTube channel who gets the negative comment is well aware that you're always going to see that one negative comment that stands out in 100 positive ones. You can't help it. It's your nature. It's not that you insist people all like you. It's because you know somebody's always going to hate you. It's that you wonder, why does this person have to say this? Well, you just got to get over it and move on. But back then, I was still learning that lesson. So I argued with this one guy for like a year, and I realized he was probably schizo, and I was just feeding into his issues. He thought he was Jesus, and he knew everything. And then another guy he was a really good guy, and we actually used to share a lot of good discussions. But ultimately, in the end, he told me I'm basically, you know, just going to burn in hell forever because I didn't take Jesus as my savior. And the whole time, as I tried to explain to him that I was into, you know, I understood Christ consciousness and what I believe Christ meant, you know, the anointed one, and that we can all be like Christ, and we all should be. And it wasn't about insulting his beliefs, but rather saying, hey, I agree with you on all the principles. I just don't agree with you that there's one particular path. And I also don't believe in a person just being forgiven because they say, oh, Jesus, forgive me of my sins. I mean, if a person really means it, fine. But, you know, there's kind of a conundrum with people who commit, you know, heinous crimes, the idea that a person could get away with it. Now, I don't believe this. I'm just saying it's kind of an issue within the belief system itself. So that's what I would debate. And kind of my idea that it's hell on earth if you create it for yourself. Heaven on earth if you create it for yourself. And that also there may be other realms beyond this that we can't comprehend, but that the Bible was written metaphorically. So I went on this tangent for a while. And then a few years went by of me talking about these things. And then eventually, what did I move into? What was my next passion or obsession? I started doing carpentry again, and I started building guitars. I got really into this for like a year, and I was buying awesome exotic wood with my friend, like zebra wood, and making these electric guitars that I ended up making I have only 4 or 5 done, 2 bass guitars, I think, and maybe 3 bass guitars, I think, and like 3 electrics, but they're not all done. And I have to complete them and finalize all the details. And the funny thing is, I had such a passion for that until I realized that I needed to make money. And I did the math of how long it took, and I said, even if I sell each one of these guitars for $1,000, it's still not going to contribute enough to get me where I want to be. It takes too long. And so my need for feeding my kids and my wife, looking at me like, what the fuck? I got a job building tiny homes. Then my boss retired, and now I'm doing carpentry for another guy, and I get paid decent. But the point here is, as soon as I did that, I had to put my other passions on hiatus. I've had a hard time finding interest in doing off-the-clock carpentry or, starting another business. When you have a job and you work hard all day and you're focused all day on your job, it's goddamn hard to find the time to do something else, at least for a lot of us. I know a lot of guys, they've got that get up and go. Hey man, if you can work 12-hour days, good for you. But I have kind of an 8-8-8 rule. And being on the highway exhausts me because I spend like an hour and a half in traffic. But 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, and 8 hours of learning or absorbing knowledge in some form, whether it's just even walking out in the woods and just existing. So that's brings me to my most recent passion, which is just existing. And this is based on over the last year, I've had kind of some interesting revelations that I haven't necessarily shared because they're very meaningful to me, but hard to explain to anyone else. The closest I could describe would be the Jungian from Carl Jung, if you're familiar with his idea of the process of individuation. And this might be compared to kind of somebody finding yourself, if you will, but seeking your soul, finding your soul, understanding your soul and what it is, who you are, really. And it's unique for each individual. There are several paths, as many paths as people. And it's finding your true self and your true nature. This is a lot more difficult than it may seem at first. And when we are young, we might think that we have it all figured out, and we find pretty quickly that that's not the case. So I've been going through this process of individuation, of trying to acknowledge who I truly am, if that makes sense. And boy, has it been a ride. I've been through some interesting times, and I'm hoping to share all of these experiences one day in a book, because ultimately that's what I feel like I'm here to do, is share my experiences with other people. I don't know what my ultimate goal is, but Lucy, stay. Lucy, stay. She wants to run out in the road. I gotta put her on her leash. But Lucy, stay. Good girl. Stay. You want to say hi, Lucy? Let's get you hooked up here. Just in case. Yeah. The simple things in life that matter. But anyway. Don't let your passions die. And I guess the message is it's okay if you lose interest in things that you used to do. We all do it. And somebody made a video a while back talking about that. I think it was Foreman's Basement. Frank. Hey Frank, if you're out there. He was talking about losing interest in music, and I was thinking about how I've been through that, and I've had the same experience of, like, as a musician, you just don't want to play a guitar anymore, or you just don't want to play drums anymore. And you're like, what's wrong with me, you know? Well, the same thing goes for anybody who does sewing or, you know, woodworking. If you lose interest in your passion, you're like, fuck, I messed up. But sometimes you can refocus that passion somewhere else, and when the time is right, it'll come back. But I gotta say, you can't force it. Sometimes it really isn't your path in the long run, or rather maybe something that you need to come back to after you've addressed some other issues in life, because I think we all have purpose, you know? We all have something to offer this world. We don't know what it is, but if we listen to the signs and we follow the passions that we have, it'll lead us there. I really believe that. It's hard to say that it's true for everyone. Sometimes destiny is thwarted by some sort of an issue. Early death or unfortunate accident. I guess the free will portion of being a human. And but if we can reach our potential in this lifetime, I think we should at least try. And if we desire something strongly, it's a passion. And if we have a passion, I think we should at least acknowledge it. A lot of people ignore their passions their whole lives. They want to be a painter, they want to be a writer, they want to be a poet. And all I can say is if you have something, go out and do it. You don't have to get rich. You might have to work a day job, that's fine. But just have faith in yourself. Because a lot of people envy that, just even having the passion. Because there's a lot of artists who lose their passion. So, if you have the passion but not the skills, use it. What a beautiful, chilly January night. My passion lately has just been just existing. And as I said, the process of individuation to me just means realizing it's okay to just be. In fact, it's it's kind of a painful path because it's so just nothing. It's almost like monk-like, if you will. Not having any desires or attachments, but also no expectations of myself. Just letting life happen. And I guess learning how much we need to take control at the same time. Anyway, have a good evening, my friends. Thanks for joining my Darkness Festival. And we'll talk to you next time. Signing off from Carpo and Lucy on January 30th, 2025.